Hi guys, so welcome back to our tutorials. In today's tutorial, let's see what is a JavaScript template retro so that we can see why we need it and why it's there. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a variable called full name, and then I'm going to set it to John. I want to try to start with the issue, and then we can see how we can resolve around this. And then we are going to create a story, and let's create story is equals to, can start, there was, so to create a JavaScript string you can use single quotes or double quotes. So I want to show you why we might need a template retro in the first place. So we can say there was once a man called, so we first reach to the first issue is that what do you do if you want to, if your string is too long and it doesn't fit the current line? So you normally use, so there was a man, once a man called, we use a plus sign and we continue here and say there was once a man called. So I'm going to first assume that we don't have this full name first. So there was once a man called, let's continue, John. He was 30 years old and he did not, then we put a space because we are concatenating strings. So concatenation of strings means adding strings together. So we can continue and say he did not like being called John. He did not like being called John, but John, and then we can have a full stop and then we continue and say, but people liked to call him John. So what is the first issue you can realize in this string? So let me console.log this, console.log story. So you can see when we console log the story, we can see the story and the story is nice. So we can read through this story. Let me make this big. And we can say there was once a man called John. He was 30 years old. He did not like being called John, but people liked to call him John. So how can we solve this issue? You can see this code is a bit ugly. We have so many plus sign. We have so many string concatenation. How can we solve this? So we can introduce a variable called full name. And then instead of using John here, we can now get rid of the name John, because what if you wanted to plug in a new name? You could go through all these Johns and changing them. And what if you had, like, the story is 3000 lines of code? What could you do? That is very hard. So that's why you can introduce a variable. So let's introduce a variable. So you can also concatenate strings to variables. This is how you can do it. So now instead of that, we now add the variable. So we can say plus full name. And then we add a new plus. Right? So I have to zoom out. So then we add a new plus and then we can go ahead whereby we have the name John here. So we need to terminate that and then add a plus and then add full name. Add a plus and then we continue with our story and then plus this John. So we need to terminate here. Make sure we add a space and then we can add a plus sign, then add the full name. And then let's save and see. So we still get the same. So we have two plus signs here. So I'm going to save that. And then we can see now the story reads, there was once a man called John. He was 30 years old and he did not like being called John. So what can you realize in this code? This code is not readable. So if you can identify the issues we are facing is that, one of the issues we are facing is that, let me write a comment here. So one of the issues we see is that embedding variables is a hassle, All right, so that's one of the issues. The next issue we can find is that writing multi-line strings is hard. All right, and then it's still a lot of work, so we are doing a lot of work. So how can we solve this using template retrievers? So this is the reason template retrievers came into play. So what is a template retriever? A template retriever is basically a string that has some fancy syntax that you can use to embed expressions or to embed pieces of code. All right, so you can embed expressions and pieces of code. The first thing we need to learn about this is, so let me comment out my story. So the first thing we need to learn is the syntax of that template retriever. So what is the syntax of that? So what we can do now to get, let's learn about the syntax. So the syntax to create a string using template retrievers. So you use something called backticks. So a backtick is this symbol you see there. So that is called, so this is the backtick. So instead of using quotes, now we introduce backticks. And these backticks, they have another name. We can call them template retrievers. And then we can call them string retrievers. Or we can call them string templates. Let me write them. So string templates, or we can call them template strings. So these are all the names that refer to this way of creating strings. So this is just a fancy way. So the same way we created a full name, we could create let username is equals to, now instead of using a string, we can use a template retriever and say TechWithTwin. And then if I console.log username, we get the username. This is similar to using a single quote or a double quote. So there's no added advantage whenever you do that in a string that is not adding expression. But now these things get a bit fancier, is that, so let's remove this story. So things get fancier such that now, what if I wanted to create what someone said? So for instance, let's say his name is TechWithTwin. And then what if I want to add, because this is a direct speech, I think in English we call them direct speech. What if we wanted to add quotes around what they said, but we are using double quotes? That would be impossible. One of the solutions we could have is to use single quotes, and then that would work. So you can see now the string we get has double quotes. So, but I used template retrievers. So let's change that to single quotes. So we still get the same thing. So the solution to getting quotes, double quotes inside a string is either to use single quotes outside, and then you can use double quotes inside. So template retrievers come to solve this such that now you don't have to think about single quotes or double quotes. You can just use a template retriever and then you can get the same exact result. So that's one of the advantages of template retrievers, is that you can embed quotes or double quotes, single quotes or double quotes inside a string. That's one of the advantages. So let's move to the next advantage. The next advantage, let's rewrite our previous story, but now using template retrievers. So you can say full name is equals to TechWithTwin. Or let's use the username. Let's say username is equals to TechWithTwin, but now I can create a story, and this story can be multi-line. So what I can say is let story is equals to, I can open a backtick and press enter. And then I can also press enter here in the backtick. And then I can start creating the story. So there was once a man called TechWithTwin. So the first scenario, we are going to disregard the username. We assume it's not there. I can comment out that. So there was once a man called TechWithTwin. We can continue here and say he did not like being called TechWithTwin, but people continued to call him TechWithTwin. TechWithTwin. You can see I can create multi-line strings using a template redraw, something that I couldn't do with double quotes or single quotes without using plus signs, which was string concatenation. So if I console log the story, you can see we get the same result. So we can get, there was once a man called TechWithTwin. He did not like being called TechWithTwin, but people continue to call him TechWithTwin. So something you can notice is that whenever we use a multi-line string, there is a new line character that is added. So that's something you might have to disregard. So you have to note that it creates new strings. So let me show you. If I press enter here on the man, it's going to cut there. It is going to insert a new line character, which is always this character. This is the new line character. So that's not the issue, but now you are able to create a story that is multi-line. All right. Yes. So now the same issue occurs is that we don't want to repeat this username everywhere. So we want to insert this username. So the previously we had to use plus signs, but now we can use a special syntax in template redraws called, this is the syntax. So you use a $sign and curly brackets. So $sign and curly brackets, and then you can insert the variable you want there. So, and then I can copy paste this in everywhere I have TechWithTwin. And then if we save, we get the same result. This is what is called templating or templates. This is what the template string comes to solve. There was once a man called the username. This is how you evaluate the variable. This is called string interpolation. So string interpolation, you use this special syntax and you can get your story through. So the next advantage we are going to talk about is now you can also do expressions in strings. So I could do let age is equals to 30. This is someone's age. If I wanted to output a string, so let me let it my string is equals to, I can use a template string and say your age will be, and then I can use a $sign and then age. We said that that will evaluate the age. Let's say next year. So you can evaluate the age. Let me show you. Console.log my string. You'll be 30 years next year. So what I'm talking about an expression is that I can do maths here. So I can do +1 here. And you can get your age is that one. So this is what is called expression substitution, in that you can do expressions here. I can multiply the age. You'll be 60 years. We can multiply by 2. I can do exponentials. This is what evaluating an expression means in JavaScript. So that's advantage number 3. So let's look at the final advantage, which is commonly used in JavaScript, which is commonly used. So let me just do this and then we can get back to HTML. So we saw how template strings work. So let me create something. I'm going to create a title. Let title is equals to the raid part. Let me use the raid too. I think that's okay. So I'm going to create a title of a film. And then inside this film, I want to show you why we might need template redraws. This is a practical usage. Then we call them characters in movies. Yeah, let me call them characters. So let characters is equals to, I'm going to create an array of characters in this movie. So one of the character is called Mad Dog. The other one was called Eco Wise. The other one was called Eka Rahmadia. The other one was called Tega Satya. So this is what I want us to do. So let me, I think autosave is doing its thing. So autosave is doing its thing. So this is my array. It has all these characters. I don't know how we can activate autosave here. I want to activate autosave. Let me search for autosave. All right, so I've added the autosave. So what I'm doing here is that we have a title of a movie or a film, and then we have characters in that film. How can we show these in the HTML? We can use the template string. So how can we do that? Let's create a string. Let's let HTML. We can say let HTML is equals to. Then we open a backtick. The first thing we are going to embed is a heading. So we can use heading level 1 and say, then we can embed the title. Remember how I showed you how to embed the title or a variable? You just use that syntax. So which is a $sign and then curly brackets. And then we can close our heading level 1. That's it. And then we can use a for loop. We can use a for loop in JavaScript. So we can use a for loop in JavaScript to loop over these users and create the UI, create the HTML template. So we can do characters. We're going to use a for each loop. For each character, you can use char for character. So for each character, what will happen? So I'm using this is basically a for each loop in JavaScript arrays. And then we can insert in our string an ordered list item. All right. So we can insert an ordered list item. Before we do that, let me break this down into. What we can do now is that we can create an ordered list item. So we can say, let's initialize an unordered list item. All right, you can see it, but we are not going to close it because we are going to insert these characters inside. So in each character, what we are going to do is that we are going to call our HTML string and then plus, let's say equals to HTML, the existing HTML string plus, and then here we use a template string again and create a list item and say list, and then we can use the character, which is now the character name, and then we can close up the list item. And this syntax simplified equals to plus is equals to. So what will happen is that this loop will run inserting these list items into this string. I hope you can see that. And then finally, we can now say HTML. We can add a new item to the string. We are going to add the closing list item. I hope you can see this. And then finally, what can we do? We can insert this into the DOM. We have two ways to insert this into the DOM. We can create the DOM element in the HTML and then we can insert it, or we could create that in JavaScript. So let's create an element in JavaScript. So let's grab the body. So const body, let body is equals to document dot query selector, and then we grab the body, and then let's create an element in JavaScript. We can create HTML elements in JavaScript. Remember, in my HTML element, it's empty. So we can create an element in JavaScript by saying let. So we can say let. Let's insert. Let's say let element is equals to document dot create element. And then what kind of should we create an element? Yeah, we can create an element. Let's create no, we don't need to create an element. Let's first, we can say body dot text content, and then is equals to the HTML. Just that. So if you save that, we get the text. So instead of using the text HTML, let's use the inner HTML. And then you can do that. So after doing that, you can see we get the UI. The UI was created using JavaScript. We use template retros to insert variables and to insert these characters dynamically. And then finally, everything worked and we got these results. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, follow, and share with your friends. So let me know in the comments, what did you learn in this tutorial? Thank you.